Alright everyone, thanks for coming back to my... Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to my channel, and as I promised, we have a comparison video today between these two Ibanez AZs, Premium versus Prestige. Let's find out what's the difference.
I don't have an intro.
I know.
I don't have an intro to put in there!
So, for this video, we found that there was a lot more differences between these two than we originally thought. When we first unboxed this, before we got it in my hands, comparing by the spec sheets, these two should be just about identical.
Yeah, they should be 100% identical. A lot of the construction is the same. Only a few hardware differences, where it's manufactured and how much you're paying for it. Which attributes to where it's manufactured.
Yes. And that's the thing, we really wanted to take a microscope to these and find every single difference we could between the two. And you're gonna see like some of these are very small details. Most of these don't really make a difference to the feel or playing of it, but are just things we notice when we really inspect these two instruments side by side. And just to let you guys know, like, what are you paying for with the difference? Like, really make sure you guys are informed so you get the best guitar for your budget.
Another great thing about the two of these is that they're both plecked. So I got mine plecked because it actually came with a malfunction. The 8th fret was completely unplayable, which on a Japanese-made on a Japanese-made Ibanez, that really shouldn't have been the case. So I sent it back to Sweetwater, and they were nice enough to give me a free plecking on this, which made it feel absolutely incredible, and I'd recommend plecking to anyone. So this is why he plecked his.
From the very start, one, I knew because these have stainless steel frets that the pluck job would be so much more worth it, because once you get a nice perfect fret job on stainless steel frets, you will probably never need to redo it for the life of the guitar. It would really take a lot to really wear down these frets. So, I would highly recommend a pluck job. They're a bit pricey, but they're so worth it. You really can't beat a fret job better than that.
So the fact that they're both plucked means that they should both play almost identical. Because they both have stainless steel frets, and they're both just the same in every single way.
Almost every single way.
Almost every single way.
And so we try to eliminate as many variables between these two guitars, and we went down to making sure the action is almost identical, the pickup height is almost identical, and we just restrung these today, before we started the video, the new pack of Diodario XC's 9-46 for maximum tone.
So we're gonna start off by going over all the obvious features that are different between these two, because there are a few that you gotta keep in mind before purchasing these instruments. So the one big aesthetic difference is that these all come in solid finishes.
Unless you pay a lot extra.
Yeah, like if you pay, I think if you pay $500 more, you can get Martin Miller's, which has a very nice flame maple top, which if I were not broke after getting this, then I definitely would.
But that's another $1,200 from this. That's almost...
Yeah, that's almost double. That's almost double a premium AZ just for a nice top on Prestige.
Yeah, which I personally, if they had tops like this on the Prestige, I would have gotten the Prestige, no question. And that was one of my things. If they had this exact color, I would debate getting it, but he already had one, so I was like, oh, I can't get the same one. So they kind of left me down with a couple options. None of the finishes that the Prestige had really called my attention. They're all really just plain finishes. The little like sunburst finish was like alright, but I didn't like the matte finish on it. So I was like, I guess I'll just go with the Prestige and get a little nicer guitar, and with the money saved, get it plucked. And so I did, apparently, as you can see.
Apparently. It's in your hands.
Oh yeah. So another big difference, which adds a bit to the weight difference between these two guitars, are the wood choice. So on this Premium, we have a poplar burl top with a basswood body that's got a little translucent green. It's really hard to see it on camera. You would have to see it in person. You can definitely see the green, and you see the green pop through of the basswood. Which, first time I ever really see basswood, you always have the basswood colored a solid color. So this is the first time I've ever seen a basswood grain.
That is true. I've never really seen basswood.
No.
Basswood's grain. This has an alder body with no top, and you wouldn't be able to see it anyway because this is a blue metallic finish, which is very beautiful.
Very nice
and
finish.
And as we said, not on Sweetwater anymore, so it's special, but...
It's not anywhere anymore, so it's old stock.
Yeah, it is. It's old
It's
stock.
completely discontinued, which They should have. I like this color a
Oh,
lot.
I love this color. So it is heavier because it is alder. So yeah, it does make it quite a bit heavier and a little bit less resonant acoustically just because it is a denser wood. So it won't vibrate as much when you're playing on the guitar.
So we weighed these two guitars. So yours came in at a whopping 7.4 pounds. And this one came in at 6.8 pounds.
It's a 0.6 pound difference between the two of these guitars.
Quick maths.
Does make it more resonant and a lot better to wave around.
Yeah, so if you're ever like a gigging musician and you're playing around standing for hours, like that 0.6 pound makes a difference. Like it's big enough that we noticed it and we were surprised it was only 0.6 pounds. Because when I held these two in my hand in the unboxing video, I clearly realized this one's lighter. But it's by no means like Strandberg lighter.
They're already like 7 pounds, so when you have like a 0.6 pound difference, it is quite a difference.
That's about like a 14%
You can
weight
kind
reduction.
of you can kind of attribute that to the block too, because the block it's like
That block is a little bit heavier.
yeah, like it could be like a few ounces heavier on the guitar too.
Yeah, it's a couple ounces, I would say.
So it is. You know, it's just a minor difference. Again, it doesn't really affect the tone. We're going to show you a playthrough of the tones out of both of these guitars soon.
Yeah, so if we start with the headstock, the most noticeable difference is one, this obviously has gold hardware, but the tuners are different.
Tuners are very...
So this has a more traditional thumb screw tuner, which I've always used, and this is kind of natural to me. But his uses a little different system.
Yeah, so I love this system because instead of using a thumb screw to lock the string in place, all you gotta do is feed it through, and then as you tighten it, it actually self-locks. You can take a pick or a coin or something to tighten it even more, but
You don't really need to.
Yeah, you really don't need to.
It's more there for in the case that you broke a string and it's stuck in there, because as you lose, you probably wouldn't be able to take it off. So you then use a pick or a coin and release the tension there so you can slide that little piece off.
So it definitely helps a lot with changing strings. It makes it way more convenient. You might be asking yourself what these holes are behind the tuners, and they're actually adjustment screws for the height of the tuning pegs.
Posts.
Because tuning
Pegs are the other thing.
yeah. So you might be asking yourself what these holes in the tuning I can't speak! So you might be asking yourself what these holes are in the tuners back here, and they're actually to adjust the tuning posts on the top so that you can see they're staggered as they go from the 6th to the 1st string. And you might be able to explain why in better words.
Yeah, so the reason why you'd want to have it staggered is to make sure you have the correct break angle at the nut, so you don't have any tuning issues and your string isn't buzzing because there's not enough tension pushing down on the nut. And you can either have an angled headstock, or you have tuners with a staggered, so as they go from the low E to the high E, they get shorter to create that angle for the strings. And traditionally you'll have either 3 or 2 groups of heights. So with this specific guitar and these tuners, it has 2 different groups of heights. So these 3 wound strings are 1 height, and the other 3 strings are slightly shorter, and this is why they can get away with just 1 string tree. You can also adjust them low enough where you don't even need another string tree, and you can just have very clean looking headstock. But as long as you have a rolling string tree, that really won't add too much friction, or have a Graphtec string tree, you'll have no friction.
So the next difference you'll see actually is in the nuts. So for the Prestige, you do get this bone oil impregnated nut, which is a very fancy name and way of saying that these strings are just going to slide right along there.
Yeah.
They're not going to lock up, they're not going to bind up, you're not really going to have any issues up here.
I don't know how they oil impregnate the bone, but that's definitely not something you want to find on YouTube. Well, on this chart, it uses a Graphtec tusk nut, so still buttery smooth, it self-lubricates. No oil impregnating here, it just has Teflon. They're still both high quality nuts, so
These are the highest quality nuts.
Yeah, the best quality, the only quality.
You can see that yours is a little bit wider than mine.
Yeah.
Mine's got a little bit of a
more ivory kind of look to it.
yeah, which obviously it's bone.
It's just natural.
Next up is the neck. So the neck is using their patented secret sauce in the way that they roast the neck.
S10. So what they do is they put these necks in a vacuum oven chamber, and they push as much nitrogen in there and then roast it. And this allows it to roast at a different temperature than you traditionally could. And so apparently what Ibanez states is that it gives it a little bit more tuning stability.
It sucks out way more moisture to make sure that it's not affected by the weather changes as much. And I can verify that it does do a lot. Like, I've owned this guitar for about 1.5 years now, and I have never pulled it out of its case and needed to retune it, honestly.
Yeah.
Which is very helpful in just wanting to play, not really needing to worry about needing to get it in tune or anything.
And if you're like us and you're tracking some songs for an upcoming album we have, and you have to do multiple takes because you're terrible at guitar, you know that your guitar's gonna be in tune for the next take, even though there's been like 80 takes.
And even if you use the ram bar as much as you want. Yeah, the neck is beautiful.
Yeah, which both the necks, regardless, will still crystallize the maple, so you're still gonna have great tuning stability. I just personally haven't had this for that long. I've just gotten this guitar, so we'll see how long this guitar holds its tuning. And from when I've had it so far, for a few weeks now, it's really held its tuning great. Time will tell. We'll see. Maybe we'll do an update video.
I'd argue that the next biggest thing, other than the neck that is a change on this guitar, is the titanium saddles. Because these do last for a very long time. They won't tarnish. They're very sturdy. It's more about the tone in the
It's
saddles,
all
right?
about tone, guys.
It's always about the tone.
Titanium gives you pure tone.
Yeah, you will never need to change your tone.
If you don't have titanium or Graphtec saddles, you have no tone, guys.
You can use the same patch for any part.
Yeah, basically.
Use your rhythm patches for lead, guys. So yeah, this has titanium. Well, that has, I think, just a regular.
I believe these might be steel saddles. I don't know if they really mentioned that, but they use whatever saddle. I'm sure they're using the same saddle that whatever comes on the Goto 510 bridge, which is what these trims are based off. They're just slightly modified for Ibanez.
I'd say they both feel exactly the same. When it comes to feel, you won't really notice. This is more of like a durability thing. Like, these are gonna last until I die. Which could be sooner or later.
Besides the saddles and the block, there's not much difference, because that only really leaves the plate.
Yeah, no, the plate is it's a special kind of plate on the Prestige. It is chrome.
Mine's gold.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah.
I think that's it for all of the differences between the two actual models. So now we're gonna get into all the finest tuning details, all the little calculations that you will not hear from Ibanez or anywhere else on the internet.
Actually, not anywhere else, because we didn't know about these until we did this comparison.
Yeah, and we are on YouTube excessively. So we're always looking around and looking at gear and stuff, and we've never heard of any of these things mentioned by anyone.
And
so
big disclaimer before we do this, guys. None of these things will really impact the playability or the feel or the sound or anything really about the guitar. These are just us going nitpicking, trying to find every single difference that we can to inform you guys. Make sure you guys really know everything about these two guitars if you're looking to grab one of these two and really trying to justify the extra money, or if you're thinking about saving money and getting a nicer top or something. So we just want to make sure you guys know everything you can. So let's start off with the headstock. So one of the first things we noticed was the headstock on the premium. The very tip is a little bit girthier.
yes, which I think is just because, like we said, they're just made in different places. So on the premium, it is a little thicker than it is on the Prestige, which is a weird kind of difference.
It's a weird difference, because even it's not the same as my RGD, which is also made in Indonesia, I believe, because those are about pointier and thinner. So I don't know why they have two different headstock shape. Another thing we noticed was, and this is a pretty obvious one that I didn't notice at first until I had this, is where the truss rod is. So the truss rod adjustment is actually sunk in here, so you don't see it. It's kind of hidden there.
Alright, versus the Prestige, where you can obviously see that the truss rod is sticking out.
Yeah.
Which is a little interesting just because they are the same scale length, they are the same in every single way. I guess they just wanted to extrude the truss rod on the Prestige to make it easier to access.
Yeah, I believe just a little easier to adjust, but with these necks, probably wouldn't really need to be adjusting them that often.
An interesting little manufacturing thing is that the planing on the Prestige is actually a little bit deeper than it is on the Premium.
And then you can also see that the Premium has a little bit of wood, kind of like a Fender Strat, where it has a little bit of wood behind the nut. opposed to the Prestige has a little bit thinner.
Yeah, the Prestige basically has like 1.5 millimeters compared to like this chunk of wood right here.
Yeah.
So one of the most obvious things between the two of these is the neck. So if you look at the neck, they are constructed a little differently. Like this one, they give it their special S-Tech secret sauce. So they do this like nitrogen vacuuming process.
They use science.
They use a lot of science.
They have big brains that go in the room and they're like, we're going to do science here, we're going to make your guitar better, and so...
Both of these necks are roasted in a little bit different ways, but the most obvious thing you can see here is that this is way darker than this neck, which is very surprising because being a Prestige, you'd expect like, I don't know, I guess darker wood.
Which is very surprising. Even between the premiums, they usually have much lighter neck grain than the Prestiges. But this one stood out to me between all the other premiums I've seen before, in person and online, because this is a very dark neck. And in the photos I got from Sweetwater before I received this guitar, I did notice it was a bit darker than that Prestige there. But until we got these in person, we didn't think it was that much darker.
Oh yeah, but the grain though. So the grain on this is actually way more prominent than it is on here. For one, being that it is darker.
It's a lot harder to see the grain to begin with.
But it also is just a nicer piece of wood because $650 extra will get you that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no flame or bird's eye.
There is no flame or bird's eye like Tom Quayle's beautiful neck and fingers and so. But it's still a very nice neck. It goes all the way to the headstock, as you can see, with the nice little Prestige logo versus... we can mention this while it's here. Like you can see that the symbols for, I don't know, the symbols are on the headstock for the Prestige, but they only have the serial number up here. The symbols for it
are down here in the jack cover.
Yeah, so my jack cover doesn't have anything, interestingly enough. So yeah.
And you're probably wondering why is there no other cavity covers or trim covers. It's because we will get down into some more details that we noticed down back here, so keep watching.
One thing that was also very surprising about the neck is that the fret edges are smoother on the Premium than they are on the Prestige.
I was also really surprised by this because I would imagine that the Prestige would have had a little nicer fret job, knowing that you are paying a little extra and you're actually having the Japanese quality made guitar. But for some reason, the edges there are a little sharper than this.
As a result of that, you do see a lot more fret markings on the Premium neck right around the edges where they did roll off those frets.
Yeah, so they are a bit rolled off, but you can definitely see some tooling marks here. So it's a little trade-off. Like, you will never really notice them when you're playing it. Like I said, we took every small inch of this guitar and we analyzed everything we could. You would probably never even notice that this guitar had some tooling marks. It's very small and unnoticeable, but you can kind of see it here and there. There's no difference in the playing, but if you roll your hands up and down the neck, your hand doesn't get caught in any of the frets.
You will see though, like looking at the Prestige, there's not a single bit of wear and tear from any tools or anything. It looks like they just slapped them in. They were blessed. They were perfect.
Except for the edges of the frets.
The edges of the frets need a little work, but they're by no means like Squire frets. They're not even like $1,500 regular frets. Another difference on these guitars is the strap buttons, although it is one of the smaller differences.
These are pretty small difference.
These are kind of dome-shaped, while these are a little bit flatter, and I'd say maybe even a little wider.
I'd say yours a little wider. By no means, like, you would really need these two, like, up against each other to, like, oh yeah, that's a little different. Like, from, like, a distance, they look identical.
Yeah, this is hardly a difference. Like, it only affects tone a lot. Yeah. So, you know, just keep in mind which one is the better one.
Yeah, if you put that one on the strap, it suspends better. It's got more suspension.
Yeah, it suspends, which means isolation of sound and the frequencies that go out the strings and make the magic.
No false low end.
No false low end.
So another difference we noticed when we were playing these, which might be attributed to the basswood body, which might be a little bit more resonance, is that this neck resonates a little more when you're playing. You can notice a little bit when you're doing like lead lines, but when you're doing chords, you can definitely feel the resonance more there. Like the neck just resonates a little bit more, and only compared to this guitar which we've tried. This might be attributed to the S-Tech.
It could be to the S-Tech. Since it is so stable, that could be why it just doesn't resonate as much as the regular roasted neck. But it's definitely a noticeable difference when comparing the two.
Yeah, it could just be down to the wood also just being more dense here. It's the inconsistency between woods. No two pieces of woods are going to be identical.
One last thing on the neck is that the finishes are totally different.
Yeah.
They are similar enough in that they're both matte, but this one feels very obviously finished with like gunstock oil or something like that, while this has a much more raw feel. Like with this, you can feel the different pores and the grain of the wood, while in this, it feels like I'd equate it to your typical, like, any, honestly, Ibanez Prestige necks. Like, if you had any RGs or any other models, it feels very akin to those Prestige models, which I'm very impressed by.
Yeah, and like, no means this is not sticky at all. Like, it kind of feels like if you ever taken, like Ibanez Prestige thing, and you kind of, like, sand it down, maybe with, like, some high grit. It feels very smooth. Like, there's no lacquering here at all. Like, you can have no resistance when you're playing, but it's a little subtle difference that you can feel between the two.
Oh, the one thing that sparked this whole discussion on how different these guitars were was when I held the guitar like this after we unboxed it. I picked up the Premium and I handed it over, and I was like, wait a minute, that's stabbing my hand. Why is the top stabbing my hand? Oh, it's way flatter than my Prestige. Because I've had this for about a year and a half now, and every time I pick it up, I grab it like this, shake it around a little bit, hand it off if I need to, put it away. No, no. And I never noticed it because this was always like just round enough for my hand to wrap around. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a radius around the edge of the body. But this, it was, even though everything about it felt the same while it was in my arms, once I put my hand here and picked it up, it was a totally different guitar.
Yeah. So once we cut the camera off when we were done recording the unboxing videos and we were going back and forth playing it, we noticed that this is a lot more angular right here in the edges, kind of akin to kind of play an Ibanez RG, where it's a very angular, pointy guitar. You kind of feel like the points a bit, and you can kind of really feel it here and there. It, by no means stabbing you when you're playing or anything, but it was just one of those things that it's like the last 10% right there. It's a little round. It feels a little more comfortable in the Prestige.
It's also a very odd difference, which is why we were looking for odd things that are different about these guitars. Because, like, who would think to say, like, oh, this is not as flat because I guess the veneer, they don't want to cut into the veneer. They want to keep a little bit flatter on the top. And
it's also really hard to come off through the camera. Like, you wouldn't really notice that easily, especially with the black burst.
So the armrest is a little bit different, interestingly enough. This is probably one of the smallest scale differences.
We did notice it's a little steeper on the Premium. You would have to really have these two side to side and like probably measure them with a caliper to really notice a difference, but it's something we noticed there. It's a little thing.
It's something you'll feel. Like, you'll feel it a little bit. If you don't have both guitars, you won't feel it.
You would never notice.
The last few things that we had on here are actually all the electronics go into this. So the first thing that was brought to our attention was the sound of the pickup selector. Now do yours. Stop. So we noticed that there is a lot more of a clicky sound on the Premium, but it also kind of like juts back. Like when you get into position, it doesn't really sit there. It kind of like moves and then kind of moves back.
Yeah, it's got a little bit more like give in positions. Which is interesting because we took everything off except for the jack. But looking at my little research I did on the Ibanez product catalog for their parts, that the switch should be the same, according to that. It looks like
they both should be the Dynamics.
Yeah, and from our inspection in person, they looked just about identical.
The only thing different with the electronics here is the pots. These are alpha pots, and those are tiny pots.
These are also alpha pots.
Okay, but these are big alpha pots.
These are full-size alpha pots. These are mini alpha pots.
And also, we noticed this while we were checking them out, once we opened the cavities, is that the pickup wires in the Prestige are only black, but he's got a yellow. He's got a green and black wire coming out from these holes.
So we're very interested now because there was a black and a green cable coming from the pickups, which is really strange because usually you only have one thick cable coming out that splits into your different colors. So we were really confused because on the spec sheets these are both Seymour Duncan Hyperion pickups. And there's no other fancy switching because these are identical. No PAs or nothing on these, so... Ibanez, why is there an extra cable?
What the hell is that green wire?
So if anybody knows why there's an extra green cable, please put a comment down. The only thing I can assume would be grounding.
Could be.
That's what I would assume, is that the cavities here have the green cable just screwed onto here so it can ground these. They're just grounding that little cavity paint there.
The only other difference in the pickup cavity is that you can see that these, even though they don't have a zip tie, they are much neater in the way they're organized and nice and fluid. You can see where all the wires are going.
Very easy to need to get in there and mod anything. While this, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a mess. There's a lot more cable length, so if you ever need to do stuff, you definitely have length to modify anything. But they just kind of zip tie these here to make it look a little nicer. Not the worst job I've ever seen.
Yeah, it looks like there's like way more miles of cable in there than
there's definitely way more length of cable in here. Yeah. Should you need it.
One more thing with the electronics, there are bigger screws in the Premium that hold the humbucker down into the body than there are in the Prestige, which I don't think really serve any functional purpose. I think they're just guitars that were made in different places and they just happen to have wood screws on hand that were like, hey, let's use these. So that's probably the only thing that really made them all that different.
Just getting all the tones in the screw. If you don't have brass or titanium or steel screws.
Oh yeah, if you don't have titanium screws, then throw out your guitar. It's worthless. It doesn't have any tone.
No tone. But what does give you some tone, apparently, is the block. So this trem block has a slightly tapered zinc block, so it's a little thinner and tapered, and the string ball ends actually sit in a little deeper into the block, opposed to your block.
Yeah, so mine is not a titanium block, but a steel block.
Yes.
And it is much thicker, it does not taper, and apparently it's better for tone because you have more material, more mass. Resonating.
Tone!
So one last thing that we think is just like a little manufacturing detail. If you look at the back plates for each of the guitars, the one on the Prestige is actually way shinier than the one for the Premium. So the Premium has a much more matte finish with a little bit rougher edges. Almost as if they didn't really bother to sand it. They were just like, here's your back plate, and then just slapped it on.
Yeah, these edges are a little sharp. You can see some tooling marks.
Yeah,
By no means like gonna cut your hand, but you can definitely see them.
Well, on the Prestige, you can see that there's this really high gloss finish. Like, you can see everything in the reflection. It's very nice and smooth all around the edges. They're basically identical except for the finish, which is, again, like another 10% goes into making sure everything is nice and clean and fluid. Again,
it's not a big deal at all. It's a piece of plastic regardless.
So I guess now we'll go into some sounds demos.
Yeah, apparently we suck. Oh, we didn't mention it.
Oh, did we not mention it?
You can graze your cheese.
Yeah, you can grate your cheese. Grace your cheese?
Grate your cheese.
Grace.
I didn't mess up saying it. Shut up.
So, for whatever reason, and it turns out it looks like a lot of the AZs that we've seen, like ours, a few videos on YouTube, they all have the same problem where you wiggle this around. There's actually scraping going on the trem arm. If you look very closely, there's a lot of scratching going on this. And we think it's because there's a piece in there that helps it lock into place.
Spring.
There's a screw on the bottom that when you screw it tight, it'll secure the spring, I guess?
Yeah.
And then it'll make sure this stays in place so it doesn't like fall like it is right now. I don't know if it's a flawed system or something, the fact that it happens to all EZs, but it ends in a lot of noise. Sometimes.
There it is.
There it is.
And it's really interesting because it took me a minute to realize it was happening on mine. Because I was playing with the trem, and at first I thought it sounded like there must have been some wear or something on one of these saddles, which would have been really surprising for a brand new guitar. But then I figured out that it was the trem arm that when you moved it made the noise. And then once I brought it up to David and he plugged his trem arm in, he never realized until he started using it after I told him that his also made the noise.
Yeah, that was sad.
Yeah.
I was upset.
Which then again, he also doesn't really use the trem that often.
Yeah, no, it just kind of sits there. I'm very not versed in the trem.
It didn't even sit on there, it was in the case. It was sitting in the case.
Alright. Let's see how these sound!
That was so bad.
So, after all of those very obvious and not so obvious differences, we're going to get into the tones that each of these are able to replicate on every single selection on both settings of the Dynamax. Not Dynamax. Dynamax is for Pokemon.
We're going to leave the rest of this video for you guys to hear the differences. So comment down below which one you like a little better. Let me know, which one do you like visually, spec-wise? Which one do you like sound-wise? Maybe you like the sound of one, but like the looks of the other.
Maybe you'll actually like the S-Tech better because the S in Tech makes it
sustain.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, that's one weird thing we did notice. So hopefully that video was pretty informative for you guys. Let me know if you have any other questions between these two guitars, and let me know which one you think is better. So, boom.
Boom.
Tough choice, isn't it? Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. So like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll send you more content like this. See you next time.
In the next one.
The next one.